Welcome to this Racing Post Bloodstock Postcast. I'm Martin Stevens from the Racing Post Bloodstock department, and my guests this week are Russell Ferris, the new Chief Executive of Weatherbys, and Nick Craven, the not so new, Communications Director at Weatherbys. Yes.
All trades.
Yes, how are you?
Very good, thanks. Thanks for having us here.
And good trip down from Wellingborough?
Yep, all good. Be in one piece.
Yep. So first off, why don't you, Russell, introduce yourself and sort of tell us about your background and how you've come to be the new Chief Executive at Weatherbys?
Yeah, look, thank you obviously for having us, Martin. Background from a farming background and from an equine background. So my granny bred a Gold Cup winner in '81, Little Oil. So we've always had horses on the farm. Tried my hand very, very poorly at sitting on a few pointers at one point. And then I sort of worked through the industry, stud farms and travelled a good bit when I was younger. And then MD at Limerick Racecourse for 6 years, which was great. Lovely part of the world to work in and great racecourse and very supportive board. And then 2 years with my old friends at the races, and then have moved to Weatherbys in 2016. So been there since.
And now in the top job. So what does your role encompass?
Yeah, so I took on the position in September, and very much look at, from my perspective at the moment, it's really about the organisation and the structure and where we want to be as a business in the future. We're very soon to be celebrating our 250th year in business. So the past is wonderful, but ultimately we have to decide where we want to be in the future. So it's very much been around the culture, behaviour of the business, and then trying to work on some of the products I have been working on before on the General Stud Book on our digital transformation piece, and trying to bring the team with me. And luckily we've got people like Nick and Simon Cooper and Shannon Regan and other people in the business who are very supportive of the plans that we have, and hopefully to give the Weatherbys name another 250 years into the future. I'll be long gone by then, hopefully.
Well, we worked out just before that, Nick, you have been working at Weatherbys for a tenth of those 250 years.
You said you wouldn't say that, Martin.
A company founded in the 1700s, was it?
Absolutely, yeah.
And you've done a tenth of that. So
thanks very much.
how does that make you feel?
Old.
He looks very young.
Yeah, exactly. You're wearing it well. So can you tell us a bit more generally about Weatherbys, what they do? And I know you've brought in a special prop.
So it's a very brief background. So I guess it's simplest to say three main pillars. The stud book, of which this is the first edition. So this is the sort of the Bible of the thoroughbred world, really, the first edition of the stud book. So James Weatherby, back in 1791, produced the first authoritative register of the thoroughbred, and that's the book you have here. So we've obviously kept our role as the mother stud book, the original stud book, so the 66 stud books around the world, and we are the mother stud book. So the stud book work is one pillar, and then the racing administration piece, which obviously we're contracted by the BHA to run racing on a day-to-day basis. And we have the spin-offs from there, which are things like race cards, catalogues, data supply, countless areas of work we do there. And the third one, a sort of burgeoning business now, the financial services, Weatherbys Bank, Weatherbys Hamilton, the insurance business, asset finance. So funny enough, the financial services side does spin back to the original, keeper of the matchbook. Yeah. One of the first roles that James Weatherby had was keeper of the matchbook. So the bank isn't actually, funny enough, that far divorced from that.
Yeah. So the basics of the business is you are the administrators of racing. An interesting thing I think is, at what point do you become do you get involved in not necessarily political things, but issues with racing? So maybe things like the Stayers Million, where Weatherbys Hamilton obviously identified with the TBA and everyone generally that there was a problem with the perception of stayers in racing, and you moved to produce this bonus, which has obviously been won in its first 2 years. So when do you step into things like that?
I think that part of it, in terms of the sponsorship with Weatherbys Hamilton, was quite straightforward. It had strong ties to the thoroughbred, obviously, and the support of the thoroughbred and the diversity of the and looking after the staying horses. But actually, as a commercial opportunity to promote Weatherbys Hamilton, which on the face of it, obviously this has to do. It was a good tool. So it was authentic in terms of having origins in the breed, but also having a spin-off to be a good promotional arm for Weatherbys Hamilton. Yes, we're still licking our wounds a few months after Stradivarius's great latest feat, when he won the Stayers Million for for a second time. But I think it was a very good sponsorship.
Yeah, and next year, of course, you've got Kew Gardens versus Stradivarius to look forward to. So hopefully they might share the spoils and you won't.
Yeah, well, we're seeing if we can go. I think at the moment, the Great Horse stays in training. So in terms of its insurability, there's some question marks over that. So we are still considering it and maybe seeing how we might be able to adapt it to go another time.
Yeah. And do you have any stake in any other issues in the industry? Things like perhaps syndicates. People want to grow syndicates. Obviously, they've been in the news for the wrong reasons at the moment, but is there any role that Weatherbys can play in managing and the administration of syndicates?
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right, Martin. People see fractional ownership as an important way of growing interest in the sport. Obviously, getting a wider group of people involved in racing as possible is seen as being important in a potential way of getting a much bigger audience and involvement. Australia's always held out as being a good example where obviously that idea of having mass ownership is popular. We are involved in a few schemes, early days yet, in terms of how we might be able to manage fractional ownership, both in day-to-day management, but in terms of broadening it as well. Some countries do it extremely well, and hopefully we can learn from that.
The other big issue hanging over the industry at the moment is Brexit. It doesn't make the most interesting coverage, but with Russell here, there's absolutely a personal stake in it for you as well, because we were talking, you are from Northern Ireland, you have a stud in Northern Ireland personally, and we were saying that you go across the border often to send mares to studs in the Republic of Ireland. Can you just talk a little bit about that, what role Weatherbys is playing in the whole Brexit issue, and also why it's so important for breeders, especially people.
Yeah, I'll clarify. It's a very small stud with a lowercase c. Yeah, look, Brexit is something we've all been dealing with the last 2-3 years as an industry, and Weatherbys, both in Ireland and the UK, we're supportive of the industries. We sit as one of 3 members in the UK with the TBA and the BHA. In Ireland, I before coming into the role in September, I worked very closely with HRI and with the ITBA as well. So it's got permutations for the free movement of horses. Globally, the movement between Ireland and the UK has the most movement of the thoroughbred in the world, with 10,000 going backwards and forwards. And then between North and South of Ireland, we've got 7,000 movements per annum, 27,000 in total when you take in France. So that is an issue. The TPA has worked extremely well over the last 30 years. It's allowed our industries to grow and to scale and to make use of the stallions and the breeding stock in other entities. So it will have issues and certainly permutations and how that will be controlled. But we in our position, we try and bring some level to that in terms of we've developed a movement system that was developed in March for one of the earlier deadlines for Brexit, which is now live and working. We're working on e-passport, which will allow, again, for traceability and welfare and movement within that piece. So technology will and should create an answer to some of the issues we may face in the future if Brexit does become a reality. And that regulation does start to bite, particularly on the legislation for movement. So there are things that we're doing to make sure that we can offset any of the risk and the liability back to the breeding industry. But it is an issue and it is a concern. And, as I know personally, for me in Northern Ireland, it will have a massive ramification in terms of how we conduct our business currently. But as I do hope some of the digital systems we're working on may offset some of that risk.
And how confident are you with the expanded administration and the new digital systems? How confident are you that they will all be ready for, say, if Conservatives won a majority in the election in Britain in December and Boris Johnson takes us out of Europe quite early in 2020, how confident are you that we would be ready?
Yeah, the movement system's live. We developed that system back in March of this year, so that system started to go. The other piece is e-passport. We're working on a vaccination app with HRI, HRB and the BHA currently, and that's going to be testing currently, and it will be live for January of 2020. But of course, that's one element of it. But then when we talk with DEFRA and we talk with DAFM and DERA, they've obviously got their databases to work on and how they then connect and bring connectivity back through the government regulatory pieces, then how as we as an industry then connect to those. So it's a piece of work. It's not going to be a simple transition from where we are now. You are hoping in an orderly Brexit, if it does happen, that we'll have a 2-year buffer, that we can identify some of the core issues that we may face, and then we can deal with those in priority order. So there's a stepped process to this. I think it's been quite ad hoc to date. And that's not nobody's fault. We're, as I said to you, we are one of a very small facet of sort of the overarching Brexit issues around education, health, and all of the pieces that go with it. So, we have a plan in place, and certainly we can deliver that if given the instruction and the information that allows us to do that.
So there's no panic anyway at the moment.
No, I don't think so.
We work with the Thoroughbred Brexit Steering Group, obviously it's the BHA, TBA, and Weatherbys. So we work together, and that covers a range of issues around Brexit, not just the Studbook one, but we're, I think, aligned in terms of how to meet the challenges anyway. Yeah,
and it is a real challenge, isn't it? Because it's such a volatile political landscape that you're having to react to all the time. With Brexit, things seem to change on a weekly basis.
We produced a lot of work and done a lot of work for the last No Deal Brexit deadline on October the 31st, and we go again. We're ready to again for what happens.
That's probably enough Brexit, isn't it?
More than enough Brexit.
More than enough Brexit.
I think it is.
We'll talk about foaling and covering numbers in 2020 because you've just, in 2019, sorry, because you've just released The Return of Mares, which you've also brought to model.
Yeah, a real page turner that this is, Mark.
Well, it is for me. I think it's for many people in the breeding industry. It really is.
Yeah.
One of the surprising things which I thought about this year was the covering numbers in 2019. Because I remember, and I'm sure you would have spoken to breeders as well at the beginning of the year, and it was quite a challenging round of sales last year, especially at the lower end. And many people said they were going to be packing in breeding or definitely bringing numbers down. And then you revealed a few weeks ago that covering numbers were only down by about 2% across Britain and Ireland. Yeah, I know, Russell, you had a theory about that. Or what happened, do you think? I mean, I was expecting a bigger downturn, not drastic, but something more than 2%. What do you think may have happened?
Yeah, I don't know the theory. I think there has been a polarisation in the market, and we're all very aware of that over the last 3-4 years, and it's simply that sort of bottom middle market. The middle market maybe is becoming a little bit more volatile, and we're going to more sort of top echelon and sort of dropping into a market below that, whether it be middle or bottom. But it's a difficult space to work in. But again, the breeding industry, quite a resolute industry, quite a traditional industry. Yes, I think there's been a lot more focus from the breeding industry around the quality of the mare that they're breeding, the horse that they're using. There is that sort of the fashion and the racing piece. The owner breeder is now probably not a force they once were in the past. But yes, you're right, 2% is not a big drop. But we, in our business, in terms of producing numbers ahead of the covering season, which isn't simple, I must admit, but we have to do that. And we work with the bodies of TBI, TBA, HRI, etc., around levies and different entities that help fund the sport. And we talked about a 1.52% drop for foaling this year, which has come to fruition, and sort of coverings next year. So I don't think, I think people have been clever in terms of the selection process, but once a breeder, always a breeder. You're still going to have your mares, but I think it's just been a more, probably a more professional consideration of how the mares are actually brought to stud.
I guess you say breeders are resolute, which obviously they are, but they're also an optimistic bunch as well, aren't they? And I suppose there's always that dream of the sales ring.
Yeah, you live in the never, and you're always hoping that something will pop out of the pedigree that wasn't there last year, and you're sort of keeping an eye on who has them in training and who owns them and where it might go to, and and I think that is the thing. You're very hesitant to make that decision on a yearly basis because, particularly in my sphere, the National Hunt sphere, it's a 4 or 5 year, 6 year commitment. And you start that process hoping that, as you say, the dream does land and something pops out, or you get the nice coat that goes on. So it's a long-term investment. It's not something you go into with your eyes closed. And that's why I don't think you're going to have even with a panic situation, you're going to have a massive clip face. We had it in 2009, 2010, 11. But as I said, that was 12,500 foals in Ireland, back to 7,500 foals in Ireland. And that was economics. That was just literally the financial sector. The model went, and people who hadn't been in breeding, who then had disposable income and got into the sport, then quickly moved out of the sport again when they didn't have the funding to support that hobby. Those that don't know, I believe, you get that 8,500, 9,000 foals in Ireland. I think economies of scale that will work. Likewise, 4,500, 5,000 foals in the UK. I think there's a supply and demand will work that allows the breeder to make some money and turn it, and for the sport to have enough runners to supply the supply chain for racing. So
Nick, you get about a lot and speaking to breeders on the ground. What vibes do you pick up about the state of the nation in breeding?
I mean, there was a massive correction, wasn't there, back in 2007, 8, 9, in terms of a foal crop drop, very significant, particularly in Ireland. Since then and now, each year you'll see from the return of mares and the general stud book, the fluctuation has been marginal, 1%, 2%, 3%. So I think it did find its line.
Yeah.
Now, obviously, as Russell says, there's a whole industry dynamic around, is it the right horse population, etc., around it. But at the moment, it seems to be at this level.
Yeah.
And it seems to be able to manage that level. Obviously, you've got imports, exports alongside that as well, and the health of the international marketplace has a part to play as well.
Yeah.
But I think it's at a pretty consistent measure now. And the stallion numbers as well, they're very consistent. I think they're identical in Ireland, 250 odd registered stallions, 150 in Britain. So those numbers are very consistent as well.
And talking about stallion numbers, there's an issue prevalent in America at the moment where the Jockey Club over there has suggested they will bring in a cap on stallion numbers. This ties into what I was asking earlier about the role of the Weatherbys. You're administrative, but would you ever be involved in, if that came in, would you ever be involved in a policing situation where you would have to implement that cap on stallion numbers, or would you stand back from that?
I mean, first and foremost, we're an administrator.
Yeah.
So, we're not a decision maker. Obviously, we're there to be a guiding hand and an advisor in terms of the information that we hold and the work we do. But I'm not sure it would be our place to make decisions in terms of numbers, and there needs to be a lot of science and work done behind that in order that we know we're making the right decisions. I mean, those would be huge decisions to make. I mean, we have a business in Ireland that Russell's much closer than I am to, Weatherbys Scientific, that obviously is responsible for parental verification of thoroughbreds, but does huge amounts of genetic work with cattle and sheep and things like that. So we have the tools, we have the business to be able to look at question marks like that, but it's not an overnight job. You'd have to use all the right information to make the right decision.
Yeah, I agree. I think we've, in the last in my time with Weatherbys, 3.5, 4 years, we're working very closely with our partners in the industry to support. We bring data, we bring information that can be used to educate and enthuse and to inform. We don't make that decision, but as Nick says, particularly around that inbreeding coefficient and that consideration, that's an industry decision that we will help provide information to educate. In the work that Scientific is doing, there is a move in the bovine world. They've gone down a SNP technology from which gives you a lot more genetic information, working on a 50,000 chip array that gives you far more data points. So we're talking about 140 data points on an information tool compared to the 1, 2 that you're getting on MS satellite. But it's about collecting that information now. As an industry, we collect that information over the next 4, 5, 6 years, and we use that to understand exactly what is a tipping point. A cap is one way to correct it, but we are not at a tipping point in the inbreeding coefficient in the thoroughbred breed. We're not at that point in place yet where it's a catastrophe. So it's now in the next 5 years that we use the resource at hand to consolidate that information and data, and then make an informed decision and do projects and studies along the way to make sure that we can indeed.
But does your work show that we may be heading towards that catastrophe or problem of having too much inbreeding and not enough diversity?
We had the International Stud Committee, which Nick says earlier. We chair that as Weatherbys as the mother stud book, and we had our conference in September, and there seems to be a correlation that the inbreeding there is becoming a tightening of that inbreeding coefficient globally, but nobody knows what the catastrophe point is. We don't know. There's no marker for it.
There what the impact is either. So good or for bad. No, is there really a test to say that inbreeding, to whatever extent it might be, is a negative? Because the thoroughbred, funny enough, isn't the most inbred.
No, far from it.
You've got some much more.
And we know in nature what horses get up to in a paddock when they're left to their own devices. They would do all sorts of inbreeding on their own part. But I think generally it's accepted that you need diversity in these breeds, isn't it? And that diversity is a good thing.
We are a thoroughbred. We're a closed herd. There will always be an element of inbreeding, no matter what we do.
Yeah.
So that is a fact of life, and we can't change that. In terms of breeding, there have been people over the last 25, 30 years who've written about breeding, and they talk about inbreeding 4 and 4, 5 and 5, and there's been this breed back to the prominent mare, breed back to the. So we've always had that that sort of belief that it has been a positive. So as Nick says, we don't know if it's a positive or negative. There's no marker. So people will get very animated and make decisions based upon hearsay. It's now about doing the fact and doing the work and doing that piece of research and making sure that what we ever do in our breed, that we don't do it for something that may come back to haunt us in 5 years' time. We have to be proactive and we have to be considerate of what may or may not be, but do that in a controlled, measured way, and then we should be in a better position.
On a personal basis, obviously, when you're working for Weatherbys and you're an independent administrator, you have to be very independent and political, I guess. But you're a horseman yourself and you're involved in horses and you speak to lots of breeders. Is it hard to sort of keep your own opinions detached? If I asked you without a Weatherbys hat on, would you have different opinions? Or
I think if you know me, I'd pretty much say what I think. Hope not in a bad way, but no, I've in the racing world, in the media world, without the races and this world, I'm going to tell you what, if you ask me a question, I'm going to say what I think. And I think Weatherbys, to be fair, Johnny has that same, sort of piece. Yes, we do a job and we hopefully do it very, very well, but he wants to be our own people and he wants to create that culture and behaviour throughout the business. So, if you ask me a question, I'll pretty much tell you with my hat or not with my hat on.
Yeah. Good. Back with your Weatherbys hat on. What else are you working on at the moment? Because you haven't spoken about the full range of products there. I know you've got some other bits and bobs there on the table.
The same as it is for you, Martin, on the Bloodstock side of the Racing Post. It's a busy time of year, isn't it? With every week gets past, another publication comes out. You mentioned the Return of Mares. Bloodstock Sales Review came out last week. Obviously, just finished. We put to bed the Stallion book, which we obviously work on very closely with the Racing Post in terms of your website. So that's looking strong. Nearly 400 stallions in that. Lots of digital stuff as well, the Global Stallions app, and loads of things in terms of that Bloodstock space, in terms of getting information out there. Obviously, the team, the cataloguing, the Bloodstock team have been madly busy with the season in terms of, we'd be the biggest researcher of catalogue pages in the world. So obviously, the last few months has been manic. Obviously, finishing off really with Tats and O'Connor in a few weeks' time. So whether it's the Bloodstock Sales Review, whether it's the thoroughbred sales guides and catalogue pages, non-stop in terms of data and making use of that data from a Bloodstock sector. Yeah.
And I must ask while you're in here, has anyone tried to get any funny names through Weatherbys recently?
I'm far too innocent to know. I'd be the wrong person. I'd probably let every name get through if it was me, but that's a never-ending trial that we put up with, and hopefully we've got some alert people and a good use of Urban Dictionary to
exactly.
Right,
because language evolves so quickly.
It does evolve, Martin. Have you got some ideas?
I might try and test you. I'll send some in. Also, have you got any favourites over the years? Any that can be said on camera?
Probably not on this.
Not on camera, anyway.
Yeah.
And then next year, as we touched upon, is the 250th anniversary of Weatherbys.
Yeah.
Can you tell us anything you might have in the pipeline to celebrate?
There'll be lots of things. We obviously it's a big birthday for anybody, let alone a company which is 7 generations on, still privately owned. Hopefully, we're still doing a good enough job that people appreciate. So there are lots of things to work around. We're obviously a big race sponsor with over 100 races in our sponsorship portfolio. So we'll work something around there. Super Sprint and the Champion Bumper and things like that. So lots of ideas. Obviously we are a pretty diverse business now, as I said, with our banking hats on. There's it's not just in the thoroughbred world that we're involved. So there'll be things beyond pure horse racing that we're doing as well. But I'm sure your colleague Bill Barber wanted to know exactly what we had planned for next year. Yeah. So we'll be filling you in. Yeah,
and. Anything planned for Christmas? Are you going back to your house in Barbados, or are you staying in the States?
I have not got a house in Barbados. You can get Northern Ireland, half as well.
No, but it'd be nice to wind down. Did you get a chance to wind down over Christmas once all the sales are finished?
Yeah, sadly, I suppose with mobile devices and social media, there probably isn't too much for wind down. There's a few days, isn't there, over the Christmas period where it gets a little bit quieter, but it seems to be manic, and it kicks off quite soon. I think I might be in Qatar for the Qatar Derby just before Christmas, and then next year. I mean, the international racing calendar is something else these days, isn't it?
Yeah. And the new events in January as well, with the Route des Étalons and the Irish Stallion Trail, of course.
Yeah, there's plenty to look forward to in the Saudi Cup in February, so it's never ending.
Oh, exactly. Well, I'm sure I'll see you again on the Bloodstock Trail at the Sales, or on the Irish Stallion Trail, or I'll come and pay my respects to Wellingborough again soon.
You lucky chap.
Yeah. Thanks very much for making the trip down to London.
It's a pleasure.
And thanks for watching, and we'll be back with another podcast soon.